Chicago, Illinois. Winter had wrapped the city in sheets of white and steel. From the 35th floor of the Scott Grand Hotel, the skyline shimmered like an empire of glass and gold. Inside, where chandeliers hummed with quiet luxury, the world below might as well not exist. But for Lily Collins, it did. It existed in every tired muscle of her body, in every shift she picked up to pay her mother's hospital bills, in every mop stroke that left her hands cracked and raw. That night, she had already worked 16 hours straight, cleaning suites most people would never even step into. The presidential suite was her last one. Her eyelids burned, her back screamed, but she whispered to herself as she wiped the marble sink, "Just one more room, Lily. One more." The bathroom was bigger than her entire apartment in the South Side. The tiles gleamed like mirrors. The bathtub could have fit a small family. She smiled faintly and murmured to herself, "Who needs a bathroom this big anyway? You could throw a party in here." The scent of imported soap and lavender polish filled the air. She reached for the mop, leaned against the toilet lid, just to rest her head for a second. 5 seconds. That's all she wanted. But exhaustion, when it's heavy enough, feels like gravity itself. And so, Lily fell asleep, right there on the toilet lid of a billionaire's suite. A few minutes later, Dylan Scott, CEO of Scott International Group, pushed open the door. He had just returned from a brutal day of back-to-back meetings in New York. All he wanted was silence, a hot shower, and to forget the numbers burning behind his eyes. He unbuttoned his crisp white shirt as he walked into the bathroom, then froze. There, in his spotless sanctuary, was a woman in a hotel uniform, asleep. What the hell? His voice echoed against the marble, sharp and commanding. Lily jerked awake in panic, slipped on the bucket beside her, and nearly hit her head. "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Water splashed everywhere. She scrambled up, eyes wide with terror, only to find herself staring at a man's shirt undone, expression fierce, muscles tense, and eyes as cold as Chicago winter. He stepped back as if she were a ghost crawling out of the drain. "Who are you, and why are you in my room?" Lily blinked, realizing the disaster she was standing in. Her uniform, the mop, the bucket, everything screamed intruder. "I didn't steal anything," she blurted. "I swear I was just cleaning and, kind of fell asleep." He raised an eyebrow, disbelief etched in every line of his face. "You decided to take a nap in my bathroom." It was 5 minutes. My body just shut down. For a second, he looked ready to explode. But then, as he stared at her, messy curls trembling, hands, eyes full of fear and exhaustion, something in him shifted. Instead of anger, a flicker of curiosity sparked. Dylan exhaled, pinched the bridge of his nose, and muttered, "Unbelievable." He turned toward the kitchen counter, grabbed a cup of coffee, and offered it to her. Lily hesitated, confused. Is this a trap?" "Drink it." She sniffed the coffee instead and winced. "This smells terrible." Dylan frowned. "Excuse me." "It's burnt," she said without thinking. "Whoever brewed it used over-roasted beans, tried to cover it up with sugar. Classic rookie mistake." He stared at her, like she'd just solved an equation only he could understand. "You figured all that out by smelling it." "It's kind of obvious," she said, shrugging. For the first time that night, Dylan Scott, Chicago's most feared businessman, actually smiled. A small, intrigued, dangerous kind of smile. "Miss Collins, right?" he asked, glancing at her badge. "You might have just saved the worst coffee in my hotel." Lily blinked. "Wait, what?" "Tomorrow morning," he said. buttoning his shirt again. "You're coming to the kitchen." I'm just a cleaner." "Not anymore." That night, as Lily walked home through the freezing Chicago streets, she replayed everything in her mind. The man, the look in his eyes, the way her exhaustion turned into the strangest opportunity of her life. In her tiny apartment, she leaned against the wall, whispering to herself, "What have you gotten yourself into, Lily Collins? If this story moved something inside you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Comment where you're watching from and tell us. Do you believe love can begin in the most unexpected places? Your voice keeps stories like this alive." The next morning, the Chicago sky was the color of steel. A pale winter light slid between the skyscrapers, brushing against the glass facade of the Scott Grand Hotel. Inside, everything gleamed with sterile perfection. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, polished brass. But somewhere beneath that surface shine, the world was already stirring with whispers. Lily Collins stood in the service hallway, the air smelling faintly of bleach and coffee. Her hands were trembling around the mop handle. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours after last night's disaster or miracle, depending on how she looked at it. She kept replaying the moment Dylan Scott had said, "Tomorrow you're coming to the kitchen." Maybe he was joking. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe she was about to get fired. She adjusted her uniform, tugged at the hem of her sleeves, and tried to swallow the fear rising in her throat. When the elevator doors opened to the main kitchen floor, the noise hit her first, the metallic clang of pans, the rhythmic chopping of knives, the sizzle of oil, the chaos of controlled creation. The kitchen was a world within a world, all motion, precision, and hierarchy. And at the center stood a tall man in a white chef's jacket, barking orders in a deep voice that carried authority. Chef Eduardo Ramirez. He turned as she entered, eyes narrowing. "You're the cleaning girl," Lily nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Behind him, Dylan Scott was already there, immaculate in his charcoal gray suit, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. He looked entirely out of place in a kitchen, yet somehow more commanding than anyone else in the room. "Good," Dylan said simply. "Let's begin." Eduardo crossed his arms, clearly unimpressed. "Mr. Scott, with all due respect, what exactly is she doing here?" "She's here to fix your breakfast." The kitchen froze. The sous chef stopped chopping a dishwasher, paused mid-spray. Lily felt her stomach drop. Sir Eduardo said carefully, "We don't need a janitor to critique my kitchen." Dylan didn't even look at him. "You tasted the coffee yesterday." The chef hesitated. "Yes, and it was terrible." Eduardo bristled. "That's subjective. It's bad," Dylan said flatly. "And if you can't taste that, maybe you need help." All eyes turned to Lily. She wanted the floor to swallow her. Mr. Scott. Maybe this isn't." He cut her off with a look. "Miss Collins, would you do me a favor? Try the breakfast setup." The head chef scoffed but gestured toward the plates on the counter: scrambled eggs, pastries, bacon, fresh juice. Lily walked closer, the scent of butter and citrus rising around her. She hesitated for a second, then picked up a fork. The eggs were the first to fall victim. She chewed slowly, brow furrowing. "The butter's wrong," she said softly. "It tastes processed, cheap, and there's too much salt." Eduardo exhaled sharply. "Excuse me." She ignored him, picked up a piece of bread. It was stiff at the edges. "This bread isn't fresh. Maybe baked yesterday, stored too cold." The chef's nostrils flared. "You think you can tell that just by taste?" She sipped the orange juice and winced. "This is half fresh, half bottled. Someone mixed it." She looked up. You can smell the artificial sweetener." For a long moment, silence filled the kitchen. Even the sizzle of the pans seemed to fade. Then Dylan spoke, voice low and almost amused. "You see, Chef Ramirez, I told you she has something rare." Eduardo's face flushed a deep red. "This is an insult." "It's reality," Dylan said. "Fix the ingredients." The chef turned sharply away, muttering under his breath in Spanish, and the room began moving again fast, angry but efficient. Lily stood frozen, wishing she could disappear. When the last dish went out to the dining hall, Dylan gestured for her to follow him to a quiet corner of the kitchen. "You were right about everything," he said, studying her face. "How do you do that?" She shrugged, clutching her hands together. "I don't know. I just notice things. The way they smell, the way they taste. I grew up cooking for my mom and little sister. When we didn't have much, I learned how to make cheap food taste better. Guess that stuck." He leaned against the counter, his eyes not leaving hers. "You have a gift, Miss Collins. Most chefs train for years to get that instinct." Her throat tightened. "I'm not a chef. I'm a cleaner." "Not anymore," he said quietly. Lily blinked. "What do you mean?" Dylan took a sip of coffee, grimaced, then smiled. "I'm starting a project, an internal tasting team, to audit every restaurant in my hotels. I want you on it." She laughed nervously. "You can't be serious. I don't have a degree or experience or—" "You have what matters," he interrupted. "Taste, honesty, courage to speak it." For the first time, his tone softened less. CEO more human. Lily didn't know how to react. "Mr. Scott, I'm just trying to keep my job." He tilted his head, a small smirk playing at his lips. "Who said you were losing it?" But before she could reply, Eduardo approached, holding a new tray. "We've redone the menu," he said stiffly, "per your assistant's suggestions." They tasted again. The difference was immediate. The butter was rich, the bread warm and fragrant, the juice bright with real citrus. Dylan looked at Lily. "Well," she smiled, despite herself. "Now it tastes like it belongs in a 5-star hotel." Eduardo's jaw clenched, but he nodded. "She's right." Dylan set the fork down. "Good. Keep her involved in quality checks." The chef started to protest, but one sharp look from Dylan silenced him. The meeting was over. When Lily stepped out of the kitchen into the crisp morning air, her heart was racing. She had just talked back to a head chef stood beside a billionaire, and somehow, she was still standing. By lunchtime, the whispers had begun. In the staff cafeteria, voices floated between bites of food. "Did you hear the boss brought the cleaning lady into the kitchen? She told Chef Ramirez how to cook." They say the CEO smiled at her. Smiled. He doesn't even smile at investors. Lily kept her head down, trying to eat her sandwich. Across from her, Carla, her only real friend at work, leaned forward, eyes wide. "Girl, what did you do to him?" "Nothing," Lily said quickly. "Then why's everyone saying he promoted you?" Lily rolled her eyes. "Because gossip travels faster than truth." Carla grinned. "You know, if I didn't know you, I'd think you were sleeping with him." Lily nearly choked. "What?" "Relax." Carla laughed. "I said if I didn't know you, but you might want to be careful. People love tearing down anyone who looks like they're climbing up." Lily nodded, though the joke stung more than she expected. "I'm not climbing anywhere," she said softly. "I'm just trying to survive." That night, she returned home to her small apartment in South Shore. The pipes rattled, the heater groaned, but it was home. She sat at the kitchen table staring at her phone. For a moment, she considered calling her mother in Atlanta, telling her everything. But then she remembered the hospital bills waiting to be paid and the reality that tomorrow could change everything again. A soft knock broke her thoughts. Her neighbor's little boy, Malik, peeked through the door holding a paper cup. "Miss Lily, Mama said to give you this. She made cornbread." Lily smiled, kneeling to take it. "Tell your mama she's saving my life." He grinned. "You smell like fancy soap." She laughed. "Maybe I cleaned too many bathrooms today." When he ran back across the hall, she closed the door and leaned her head against it, letting herself breathe for the first time all day. Outside, the snow was melting, the city breathing again. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, only that somehow, against all odds, a door had opened. And even if it scared her, she couldn't ignore it. Miles away in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, Dylan Scott stood by the window, a glass of scotch in hand. His reflection stared back at him, unreadable. He had built an empire on discipline, on precision, on never letting anyone close enough to surprise him. Yet one woman, a cleaning staff he'd caught sleeping on a toilet, had done exactly that. He found himself thinking about her laugh, her eyes when she spoke the truth without fear. There was something raw in her honesty, something he hadn't tasted in years. For the first time, he wasn't sure if what intrigued him was her talent or the way she made him feel human again. The city stretched beneath him, frozen, glittering, merciless. And somewhere out there, Lily Collins was trying to find sleep while his mind refused to let go of her. He turned off the lights, but her voice lingered. "It's burnt. You can smell it." A small smile crossed his face before he whispered into the empty room, "Maybe it's time I learned how to taste again." The invitation came 3 days later. Lily found it tucked in a cream-colored envelope slipped under her locker door, her name handwritten in black ink with clean, sharp strokes. Miss Collins. The handwriting was unmistakable, neat, decisive, confident. She tore it open with trembling fingers. Inside was a single card, embossed with the crest of Scott International Group, and beneath it, a short message. "Meet me at the Executive Lounge. 6:00 p.m. sharp. DS." She must have read it a dozen times. 6 o'clock. Executive Lounge. Dylan Scott. It didn't make sense. She wasn't supposed to be in that part of the hotel. People like her cleaned those floors. They didn't walk on them. The clock on her phone said 5:07. Her heart raced as she splashed water on her face, fixed her uniform collar, and told herself to breathe. This couldn't be about the kitchen again. Maybe she'd made a mistake. Maybe she was being transferred, or worse, fired politely. By the time she reached the 40th floor, her palms were slick with sweat. The elevator doors slid open to a world of glass and gold, the executive lounge reserved for investors, celebrities, and men like Dylan Scott. The skyline bled red and gold through the windows, the dying sun slicing across the city like a blade. Dylan was there, sitting by the window, with a cup of coffee in front of him. No tie tonight, just a navy shirt rolled to his elbows. When he looked up, his eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "Sit down, Miss Collins." She obeyed, every muscle tense. "You look like you're expecting bad news," he said. "Usually when I get called to the top floor," she replied, "it's not for a compliment." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that made her heart skip against her will. "Noted. But this time, it's neither punishment nor praise. It's an opportunity." He slid a folder across the table. Inside, she saw an itinerary printed on crisp white paper, New York Culinary Expo, Waldorf Astoria. Her breath caught. "This can't be for me." "It is. You'll come with me to New York next week." She blinked at him. "New York? Why would you?" "Because I need someone I trust to help evaluate chefs for our new hotel restaurants," he said simply. "Someone who doesn't flatter or fake opinions. She shook her head, disbelieving. I clean rooms, Mr. Scott. I don't belong at a culinary expo. He leaned back in his chair. You belonged in my bathroom that night. She blushed. That was an accident. Exactly, he said, eyes glinting. And maybe this will be another one worth having. There was a beat of silence between them, the kind that hummed with something unspoken. She looked away out toward the skyline where the last light of day flickered behind the towers. Why me? She whispered. You could take anyone, a chef, a critic, someone with a title. Because I'm tired of titles, he said. They tell you what people are not, who they are. You see things others don't. You tell the truth. That's worth more than any degree. Her throat tightened, words trapped behind disbelief. For a moment, she saw not the CEO, but a man searching for something beyond success. Finally, she managed. I need time to think. You have until Friday, he said. If you don't show up, I'll assume it's a no. When she left the lounge, her reflection in the glass looked like someone else, someone she didn't quite recognize. That night, she walked home through the bitter wind of Michigan Avenue, the snow turning to slush beneath her boots. Her mind refused to settle. New York, flights, fancy hotels, Dylan Scott. It was absurd. At her apartment, her sister Layla was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, textbooks scattered. Hey, you look like you saw a ghost, Layla said, grinning. Something like that, Lily murmured, sinking into a chair. Layla closed her laptop. Talk. So Lily told her everything about the bathroom incident, the kitchen tasting, and now this impossible offer. Her sister listened, eyes wide. When Lily finished, silence hung between them for a moment, before Layla said softly, You should go. I can't, Lily whispered. You know what people will say. They already think what they want. Layla interrupted. But since when did other people's voices pay the rent? This man sees something in you, Lily. Maybe he's wrong. But what if he's not? Lily exhaled shakily. What if I embarrass myself? Her sister smiled gently. Then you'll come home, laugh about it, and go back to work. But what if it changes your life? Lily stared at her for a long time. Then she nodded. A week later, she stood at O'Hare Airport beside Dylan Scott. He looked effortlessly composed, scrolling through his phone while she tried to stop fidgeting with the borrowed coat Carla had insisted she wear. First time flying private, he asked without looking up. She shot him a wary glance. You say that like it's normal. For me it is. The flight attendant smiled and offered her champagne. She waved it off and muttered, I can't even afford sparkling water right now. Dylan glanced up, then something like amusement flickering across his face. Then this is research. Consider it part of your new educational experience. Educational, she repeated dryly. Right. When the plane took off, the world below shrank into toy buildings and ribbons of highway. For a moment, Lily forgot her nerves. She'd never seen clouds from above, never felt this strange blend of fear and freedom. Halfway through the flight, Dylan closed his laptop and turned to her. You ever been to New York once, she said. A school trip in high school. We stayed in a cheap motel in Queens and ate $1 pizza. I loved it. He smiled faintly. Maybe we'll upgrade your experience. Please don't, she said quickly. I like $1 pizza. He laughed, a real laugh this time, not the polite corporate one. It startled her. His face changed when he laughed softer. Human. The rest of the flight passed quietly. She caught glimpses of him, reading, occasionally jotting something down, the light from the window, tracing sharp angles across his jaw. She hated that she noticed. When they landed at JFK, the world hit her, all at once. The flashing lights, the noise, the rush of motion. Limousines, chauffeurs, cameras. New York was alive in a way Chicago never was. Chaotic, unapologetic, electric. Their car wove through Midtown, stopping in front of the Waldorf Astoria. Lily stared at it, heart pounding. Marble gold history. It was like walking into another universe. Dylan led her inside, barely glancing at the staff who greeted him by name. "Our suite's on the 24th floor," he said. "Our..." He smirked. "Relax. You get your own room." She blushed. "That's not what I know," he said. "But your face is too easy to read." He handed her a key card. "Rest. Tomorrow's the opening dinner. You'll be my guest." When she entered her room, she stood still for a long moment. The bed looked like a cloud. The city glittered through the window, and for the first time in years, she felt small, not because she was invisible, but because everything ahead of her was too big to comprehend. She took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the doubt, the exhaustion, the version of herself that only knew how to survive. When she came out, she looked at her reflection and whispered, "You belong here, even if no one believes it yet." The next night, the ballroom shimmered with golden light. Every table glowed beneath crystal chandeliers. Waiters glided between guests in black tuxedos, laughter rippling like champagne bubbles. Lily stood at the edge of it all, her borrowed black dress hugging her frame, her curls pinned neatly. She felt like an imposter in a painting. Dylan approached, adjusting his cufflinks. "You clean up well, Miss Collins." "I had help," she said. "Your confidence," she smiled faintly. "That too." When the host announced dinner, they took their seats among chefs, investors, critics' names she'd only read about. Conversation flowed easily for everyone except her, until one of the guests, a silver-haired Frenchman, leaned toward her with a polite smile. "Mr. Scott tells me you have a special talent for taste." Lily's fork froze midair. "He said that..." The man poured her a glass of wine. "Tell me then, what year is this vintage?" She glanced helplessly at Dylan. He just watched her, silent, curious. Taking a breath, she brought the glass to her nose. The scent was rich, layered oak fruit smoke. She took a sip, letting it rest on her tongue. 3 years, she said finally. A California blend. Oak-aged. Whoever made it tried to balance youth with ambition. The man's eyes widened. "Mon Dieu." "Correct." The table erupted in mild applause. Dylan's lips curved into a small, satisfied smile. "Told you," he said quietly. She turned to him, incredulous. "You set me up." "Maybe," he murmured, "but you handled it." As the evening unfolded, Lily found herself laughing, tasting, even debating flavor profiles with world-class chefs. For the first time, she wasn't shrinking into the background. She was holding her own. Later, as the night thinned and the crowd began to drift away, she found herself standing on the terrace overlooking the city lights. The wind was sharp, carrying the faint hum of New York below cabs' laughter life. Dylan joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He offered her one. "You survived your first test." She took it, smiling. "Barely." He studied her for a moment, his gaze softer than before. "You belong here, Lily. You just don't believe it yet." The city glimmered beneath them, endless and alive. She turned to him, meeting his eyes. "Maybe I'm learning." He nodded, looking out at the horizon. "So am I." And for a long, wordless moment, they stood side by side, 2 people from opposite worlds, both realizing they might not be so different after all. The following evening draped New York in gold and glass. The Waldorf ballroom had emptied, leaving behind faint echoes of laughter and the scent of expensive wine. Lily had spent the day touring the expo with Dylan, tasting, learning, observing. But as night fell, a new kind of tension settled between them. It wasn't the sharp professional silence she'd come to expect. It was quieter, denser, like something unspoken had begun to breathe between every glance and every word left unsaid. She stood in front of the full-length mirror in her suite, smoothing the fabric of her navy blue dress. Carla had lent it to her, calling it the armor of elegance. The neckline was modest, but the way it caught the light made her look softer, somehow less invisible. She wasn't sure if she liked that or not. There was comfort in invisibility. Tonight she wasn't allowed to hide. A knock came at her door. Her heart jumped. She opened it to find Dylan standing there, still in his black suit tie, loosened the faintest shadow of exhaustion under his eyes. He looked like someone who hadn't stopped moving in years. "Ready?" he asked, his voice low. For what exactly, she asked, stepping into the hallway. "There's an after-event reception. Smaller crowd. Investors, critics. People who like to test boundaries. And you're bringing me to test them." His mouth curved slightly. Something like that. The limousine cut through Manhattan's midnight traffic, the city glittering outside like a sea of restless stars. Inside, silence filled the space between them. Lily watched the skyline reflected in the tinted glass, her pulse steady but restless. "You're quiet," Dylan said finally. "I'm thinking about how surreal this all feels. A week ago I was scrubbing floors. Tonight I'm sitting in a car with the man whose name is probably on the building I cleaned." He leaned back, studying her. "Does that bother you?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "It scares me." He didn't smile this time. "Good. Fear means you're awake." The reception was at a rooftop lounge overlooking the city. Soft jazz floated through the air, mingling with the perfume of power and pretense. People spoke in tones too smooth, smiles too polished. Glasses clinked like the ticking of 1,000 ambitions. Lily followed Dylan through the crowd, trying to keep her breathing steady. Heads turned as they passed, a few curious, a few judgmental. She caught snippets of whispers. "Who is she? She doesn't look like a critic. Must be someone special." When they reached the center of the room, a woman detached herself from a small group near the bar. She was tall, blonde, and radiant, the kind of beautiful that seemed deliberate, crafted, rather than born. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. "Dylan Scott," she purred. "So you still make an entrance." Lily froze. Dylan's tone shifted, colder now. "Madeline. Madeline Fox," the woman said, turning her gaze on Lily. "You must be his new project." Lily extended her hand, forcing a polite smile. "Lily Collins." "Oh, I've heard," Madeline said, her tone smooth as silk and twice as cutting. "The prodigy from Chicago, the cleaning lady with the golden nose. Quite the story." Lily's cheeks warmed, but she didn't look away. "It's less glamorous than it sounds." "I doubt that," Madeline said, her eyes flickering to Dylan. "He's always had a weakness for discovery, especially the kind that keeps the press entertained." Something in Lily's stomach twisted. She didn't need to ask. It was obvious. Madeline wasn't just a colleague. She was someone who used to know Dylan intimately, maybe too intimately. "Excuse me," Lily said softly, turning toward the balcony. The cold air outside hit her like a release. The city sprawled beneath her, lights pulsing in the dark. She gripped the railing and tried to breathe. Behind her, the door opened. "You handled that well," Dylan said quietly. Handled what she said, without turning around. Being humiliated. She was out of line. She wasn't wrong. He frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Lily turned, then eyes fierce. "You brought me here. Surrounded me with people who don't even think I belong in the same room. You expect me not to notice the way they look at me. They look at you because they don't understand you, he said evenly. Not because you don't belong. She laughed softly. You really think there's a difference? For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind tangled her curls, and the distant horns of the city echoed below. You know, she said, voice trembling slightly, where I come from. People work their whole lives for 1 ounce of respect. No one hands it to us. We earn it 1 insult at a time. I respect you, he said quietly. Do you? She took a step closer. Or am I just a novelty? A story you can tell investors about how the billionaire found a diamond in the dust. His jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. You really think that's what this is? I don't know what this is. He studied her for a moment, then stepped forward close enough for her to feel the heat of his breath. This is me trying to remember what honesty feels like. Her heart skipped. For a second, she thought he might kiss her, but he didn't. Instead, he looked away, the city lights reflected in his eyes. Go back inside. Don't give her the satisfaction of thinking she got to you. Lily hesitated, then turned toward the door. She walked past Madeline without a word, but the older woman's smirk followed her like perfume. By the time they returned to the hotel, the silence between them was heavier than before. In the elevator, Lily stared at the glowing floor numbers, her reflection fractured across the mirrored walls. You shouldn't have let her talk to you like that, Dylan said finally. I've heard worse, Lily replied softly. He looked at her then, and something unguarded passed between them, a recognition of 2 people equally haunted by their own walls. When the doors opened, she stepped out first. Good night, Mr. Scott. Dylan, he corrected. She turned slightly. Good night, Dylan. The way her voice wrapped around his name lingered long after she disappeared down the hall. The next morning dawned gray and restless. The city felt different, colder, sharper. Lily couldn't shake the image of Madeline's knowing smile or the sting of her words, a weakness for discovery. She spent the day at the expo, moving from booth to booth, tasting dishes, taking notes, trying to bury herself in the work. But her thoughts kept circling back to him. When she returned to the suite that evening, a note waited under her door again. No envelope this time, just a single line written in that same precise handwriting. Meet me on the terrace. 10 p.m. She told herself she shouldn't go, that she should ignore him, pack her bags and go home before any of this spiraled into something she couldn't control. But at 9:59, she found herself standing in front of the terrace door anyway. Dylan was already there, leaning against the railing, city lights washing over his face. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said without turning. I wasn't sure either. He gestured to the chair beside him. I owe you an apology. For what? For letting someone like Madeline make you doubt yourself. She didn't make me doubt myself, Lily said quietly. She just reminded me where I stand. He turned, then his gaze searching hers. Where you stand is next to me. The words hit her harder than they should have. That sounds nice, she said, forcing a smile. But reality doesn't work like that. You and I, we come from different worlds. Then maybe it's time those worlds collided, he said, stepping closer. Why? Because I'm tired of pretending I don't feel it. The air between them shifted thick with something both terrifying and magnetic. Lily's pulse raced, but she didn't move away. Dylan, she began, but he interrupted softly. Lily, he said her name like it was something sacred. You walked into my life and turned it upside down. I don't know what to do with that. Her throat went dry. You don't have to do anything. I do, he said, I can't keep walking through a world that feels colorless when you're the only thing that makes it real. He reached out, then his hand brushing hers. It wasn't forceful, wasn't planned. It was a confession in motion. The kind of touch that burned long after it ended. For a moment, she let herself feel it, the warmth, the pull, the quiet ache of wanting something impossible. But then she stepped back. "You don't mean that," she whispered. "Yes," he said, his voice steady. "I do." The city roared beneath them, endless and indifferent. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But she'd seen too many promises break under the weight of reality. "Good night, Dylan," she said finally, turning toward the door. He didn't stop her. He just watched her walk away, the ghost of her presence clinging to the air like the fading scent of rain. When she reached her room, Lily pressed her palms to her chest and closed her eyes. The walls felt too quiet, the world too large. Somewhere in the distance, she could still hear his voice. "Where you stand is next to me." The morning after felt heavier than the gray sky hanging over Manhattan. The city buzzed with its usual indifference, horns blaring, heels striking wet pavement. But inside the Scott Grand, the air felt still. Too still. Lily had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the way Dylan had looked at her under the city lights. The quiet honesty in his voice, the way his words had almost broken through the walls she'd spent years building. She stood by the window, a cup of coffee cooling in her hands. Down below, taxis streamed through Fifth Avenue like veins of gold. Somewhere in that maze of motion, people were chasing dreams, escaping memories. Or both. She wondered which of those she was doing. A soft knock came at her door. When she opened it, Dylan was standing there, his expression unreadable, his tie missing, but his composure flawless as ever. "Good morning," he said, voice calm but clipped. "Morning," she replied, setting the cup aside. "You're up early?" "I never really slept." She wanted to say me neither, but silence filled the space between them. He held a folder in his hand, the edges creased from being carried too long. "I have to go back to Chicago today," he said finally. "An emergency meeting with the board." Something in her chest tightened, though she didn't know why. "Right. Of course. You're the CEO. Crises never wait. I want you to come with me." The words caught her off guard. "To Chicago, yes. There's a project I'm launching, something bigger than what we've done before. I want you involved." Lily blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "You want me involved, Dylan? I'm not an executive. I'm not a consultant. I'm barely figuring out which fork to use at these events." He smiled faintly. "And yet you manage to see things none of them do." She crossed her arms, struggling to find her balance in his gravity. "This isn't charity, is it?" "No." His gaze softened. "It's belief." The word hit her harder than she expected. No one had ever said it to her like that. Not as a favor, not as pity, but as truth. She hesitated. "Why me?" "Because when I look around those rooms," he said quietly, "I see people who talk about perfection. You're the only one who sees potential." Her throat felt tight. The city outside blurred into streaks of rain. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say yes," he replied. But she didn't. Not yet. She just nodded faintly, and he took it as enough. By that afternoon, they were on a flight back to Chicago. The skyline reappeared beneath the clouds, familiar, sharp-edged, and cold. Dylan's world of glass towers and tailored suits waited for him like a throne made of mirrors. Lily's world, by contrast, had always been grounded, real, tangible, sometimes brutal. She wasn't sure she belonged up here, 30,000 feet above the version of herself who used to scrub his floors. When they landed, a sleek black car was waiting. The drive to the corporate tower was silent, except for the rhythmic hum of tires against wet asphalt. Dylan glanced at her occasionally, as if making sure she hadn't changed her mind mid-flight. Inside the boardroom, the air was heavy with expectation. Executives sat around a long glass table, men and women in power suits, their expressions carved in stone. Dylan entered first, confident and calm. Lily followed a few steps behind, feeling every pair of eyes turn toward her. "This is Lily Collins," Dylan announced. "She'll be joining us as an advisor on the new project." A murmur rippled through the room. One man, a graying VP with a voice like gravel, spoke up first. "Advisor, on what grounds exactly?" Dylan didn't flinch. "On talent, observation, and an ability to understand quality better than anyone I've met." Someone else scoffed. "With all due respect, Mr. Scott, are we hiring intuition now, or are we just mixing business with personal matters?" The implication was obvious. Lily felt heat rise in her face. She wanted to disappear, but Dylan's voice sliced through the tension. "Be careful, James," he said quietly. "You're talking about someone who saved our brand's reputation in less than 48 hours. James folded his hands, but said nothing more. Lily sat at the edge of her chair, her pulse thundering in her ears. She didn't belong here, not among these people with their polished voices and predatory smiles. But when Dylan turned to her and asked, "What do you think, Collins?" she forced herself to breathe. "The concept's strong," she said, scanning the files on the table. "But it's sterile. You're building a brand for humans, not machines. If you want people to remember, you give them something that feels alive." For a moment, silence. Then unexpectedly, one of the marketing directors nodded slowly. "She's right," he said. "We've been too focused on efficiency. We've lost the story." Dylan's mouth curved slightly, the ghost of a smile flickering across his face. "Told you," he murmured. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted. Lily had gone from outsider to unexpected disruptor. Even the skeptical VP avoided meeting her gaze when the meeting adjourned. Outside in the corridor, lined with abstract art and cold light, Dylan stopped beside her. "You handled that perfectly. I thought they were going to eat me alive," she said, letting out a shaky laugh. "They tried," he replied. "You didn't let them." She smiled, small and real. "I'm not sure what's scarier, facing your board or facing you when you're proud." He raised an eyebrow. "Proud?" "Don't deny it." He didn't. He just looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "You keep proving me right." Over the next week, the rhythm of their lives changed. They worked together daily, testing menus for the new luxury dining chain he was launching, interviewing chefs, designing experiences that blended flavor, story, and emotion. Dylan's reputation as a ruthless perfectionist began to soften around her. He laughed more, even teased her occasionally. And Lily, despite her fear of falling too fast, began to realize she wasn't just part of his project anymore. She was part of his life. But where warmth grows, shadows always follow. Rumors started circulating again, quietly at first, then louder. The staff whispered in hallways, the press speculated. The billionaire and the maid. They called her a social climber, a headline, a scandal waiting to happen. Lily ignored it as best she could. She'd faced worse. But one afternoon, as she stepped out of the elevator, she overheard two assistants whispering near the reception. "He's bringing her to Paris next month." "You're kidding. His last girlfriend was a model." "This one?" "She probably still lives in a walk-up." They giggled, voices dripping with envy. Lily froze, the words cutting deeper than she wanted to admit. When she walked past them, The laughter stopped, but their smirks lingered. She made it to Dylan's office, trying to steady her breathing. He looked up from his desk, instantly noticing the storm behind her calm expression. "What happened?" "Nothing," she said quickly. "It's fine, Lily." His tone left no room for evasion. She met his eyes, anger and hurt colliding in her voice. "I can't do this if it means being the punchline in every room I walk into." He stood, stepping closer. "You're not a punchline. Then what am I? The story of the week, the scandal that proves a billionaire has a heart." He flinched slightly, not from her words, but from how close to truth they might sound. "You think that's how I see you? I don't know how you see me," she whispered. "And that's the problem." The room went quiet, except for the faint hum of the city below. Finally, Dylan exhaled, his voice low but certain. "I see you as the reason I wake up wanting to build something that matters again." She looked away, heart pounding. "That's dangerous. So is pretending it isn't real." They stood there, silence, stretching thin between them, filled with everything they couldn't say. Then his phone buzzed, shattering the fragile moment. He picked it up, expression hardening. "It's the investors," he said. "They want an emergency call." Lily nodded, stepping back. "Go." He hesitated, as if wanting to say more, but then turned toward the window, voice already slipping into business mode. She left quietly, the door closing behind her, like the end of a heartbeat. That night, Chicago's skyline glowed under a thin veil of mist. Lily walked alone along the riverfront, the air cool against her skin. Across the water, the city reflected itself, light against shadow, beauty against concrete. She thought of him, of Dylan's contradictions, his armor of power hiding a soul that still remembered loneliness. She thought of herself, of how she had crossed from the world of night shifts and mop buckets into a life that terrified and tempted her in equal measure. She wasn't sure if she was climbing or falling, maybe both. As she turned back toward the hotel, her phone buzzed with a message. Just 3 words. "Look outside." D. She frowned and glanced up. Across the street, the lights of a nearby rooftop flickered on. Dylan stood there, hands in his pockets, wind tugging at his coat. He didn't wave or call out. He just looked at her, steady, silent, and certain. And for the first time, Lily didn't feel like she was standing in his world. She felt like he was meeting her halfway. Rain had fallen through the night, leaving the streets of Chicago slick and shimmering under the gray morning sky. The world outside Dylan's penthouse stretched endlessly, glass towers veiled in fog, their reflections fractured across the lake. Lily stood near the window, barefoot, her fingers wrapped around a mug of untouched coffee. The city looked distant, almost painted, beautiful, unreachable and cold. She hadn't seen Dylan since that night on the rooftop, when silence had said everything words could not. After that, their lives slipped back into motion. Meetings, tastings, phone calls, decisions. But beneath the surface, something fragile had changed. Every time their eyes met, something lingered. Every time he said her name, her pulse betrayed her. He arrived that morning without warning, his coat damp, his hair slightly disheveled. "You didn't answer your phone," he said quietly. "I needed quiet," she replied, setting the mug down. "The world's been loud lately." He studied her, his gaze softer than usual. "I heard about the article." She let out a dry laugh. "Of course you did. You probably read it before I did." "They had no right." "They had every right," she said. "They live off stories like ours. Or whatever this is." "This," he repeated. She turned to face him fully, her eyes steady. "Whatever we are. Whatever they think we are." For a moment, the sound of the rain filled the silence between them. Then Dylan stepped closer. You think I care what they say? You should, she said, her voice trembling but calm. You've spent your entire life building a name out of precision and control. Don't throw it away because of me. He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. You think being with you is a risk I can't afford. But the truth is, not being with you feels like one I can't survive. Her breath caught. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to. But belief had always been her weakness. It was the first thing the world had taught her to bury. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed again. He hesitated, glancing at the screen, then silenced it. The board can wait, he said, voice low. This can't. Lily stepped back. Dylan, stop. Stop what? Trying to fix me, she whispered. You're a man who solves problems. That's what you do. You see cracks, you seal them. You see something broken, you rebuild it. But I'm not something to fix. I'm not a project. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his tone was almost a whisper. You're not broken, Lily. You're the only thing in my life that feels real. Her throat tightened. She turned away, pretending to adjust the curtain just to keep her hands from shaking. That's the problem, she said. You don't get to decide what's real for me. He stepped closer, close enough for her to feel the faint warmth radiating from him. Then tell me what is. She turned, and for a moment their eyes locked, his, steady and searching hers, torn between defiance and longing. The world outside faded, leaving only the rhythm of rain against glass. Real, she said finally, is a mother working 2 jobs so her daughter can dream of something better. Real is knowing that dream will never come easy. Real is standing in a room full of people who think you don't belong and smiling anyway. Real is the part of me you'll never understand. Dylan didn't move, didn't speak, but the look in his eyes changed something between admiration and grief. You're wrong, he said. I understand it better than you think. How could you? She asked softly. You were born into everything I had to chase. He smiled faintly, but there was no humor in it. My father used to say the same thing about me. He built this empire from nothing and told me I'd never understand what it cost him. He was wrong too. She blinked, surprised by the sudden crack in his armor. You never talk about him. There's not much to say. He turned to the window. He died the day I took over the company. I thought I'd earned his approval, but he left without saying a word. The truth is, I've been trying to prove something ever since. To him, to everyone. He looked back at her, and maybe to myself. Lily's anger softened, replaced by something she didn't expect: empathy. Beneath the layers of power, of arrogance, of certainty, she saw the same ache she carried, the need to be enough for a world that never stopped demanding proof. You don't have to prove anything, she said gently. Neither do you, he replied. The rain slowed outside, tapering into a fine mist. Somewhere far below, the city began to move again, horns, footsteps, life. But inside, time stood still. He took a step toward her, then another. She didn't retreat this time. When his hand reached for hers, she let him. His touch was firm, grounding, like the world was something they could steady together. Lily, he said quietly, tell me to stop and I will. She didn't. The distance between them dissolved, and his lips met hers. Not like a conquest, not like a confession, but like an answer that had been waiting too long. The kiss was slow, deliberate, carrying the weight of every unspoken word that had built between them. When it broke, she rested her forehead against his chest, feeling the faint rhythm of his heartbeat against her cheek. This changes everything, she whispered. Good, he said, It's about time something did. For the first time, she smiled, not the polite smile she wore to survive boardrooms and whispers, but a small, genuine one. The kind she hadn't felt in years. Days passed, but the city never slept. Chicago moved with relentless speed, oblivious to the quiet revolution unfolding between them. Dylan's office, once a fortress of control, now held traces of her presence. Her notes on menus scattered across his desk. Her laughter lingering faintly in the air after long nights spent arguing over details that no longer mattered. The project, the Scott Legacy Kitchens, was nearing launch. It was meant to redefine fine dining across the country, blending innovation with soul. And somehow Lily had become its heart. But success breeds envy, and envy always finds a stage. One afternoon, while reviewing final reports, Dylan received an anonymous email. No subject line, no sender, just a single link. He clicked it and froze. It was a leaked photo. Him and Lily on the balcony, their faces close, their hands entwined. The angle was invasive. The caption cruel, the CEO and his maid. Is this the real recipe for success? By the time he looked up from the screen, his assistant had already entered the room, pale and anxious. "Sir, it's all over the news." Within hours, the media storm erupted. Headlines screamed scandal. Commentators speculated about favoritism, manipulation, betrayal. The company's stock dropped 3 points in a day. The board demanded an emergency meeting. Lily found out the same way everyone else did, through her phone. One image, a dozen notifications, 100 messages that all said the same thing: "We saw you." When Dylan arrived at her apartment that night, she was sitting on the couch, her phone face down on the table, eyes red but dry. "You should go," she said, before he could speak. "I'm not leaving you." "You should," she said again, her voice breaking slightly. "This is your world, Dylan. Scandal kills men like you, and it destroys women like me." "Then let it," he said, his voice fierce but steady. "I'll rebuild it." She shook her head. "You can't rebuild something that never accepted me to begin with." He stepped closer, but she stood, keeping her distance. "Do you know what they'll say? That I used you. That I slept my way to a headline. That everything I've done, every idea, every moment, was because you handed it to me. They'll say what they always say," he said quietly, "until we give them something else to believe." Her eyes met his, full of pain and defiance. "And what if I'm not strong enough to fight them?" He reached out gently, brushing a curl from her cheek. "Then I'll fight for both of us." Her resolve faltered. The tears she'd been holding back finally fell silent, but relentless. He pulled her close, and she let herself sink into the quiet certainty of his arms, the only place that still felt real. The storm that swept through Chicago that night didn't just flood streets. It flooded headlines, reputations, and lives. The next morning, the city woke up to chaos. Every news channel, every blog, every social feed carried the same story: the billionaire and the maid. The words dripped with cynicism, with disbelief, with the cruel satisfaction of watching something perfect crack. Lily stood by the window of her small apartment, watching the rain taper into mist. The mug in her hand had gone cold long ago. Across the street, people were leaving for work, carrying umbrellas, holding coffees, living their ordinary lives. How easy it must be, she thought, to walk outside without fear of being seen. Her phone buzzed for the 100th time. She didn't need to check it. She knew what it would say. Another reporter, another threat, another stranger's opinion of who she was. When the knock came, she didn't turn. "It's open," she said quietly. Dylan stepped in, his face drawn, but his posture as controlled as ever. The kind of control that only existed when a man was fighting not to break. He closed the door behind him, but he didn't move closer. The distance between them was measured not in feet, but in everything that had happened since the night she kissed him. "They called an emergency board meeting," he said finally. "I know," she replied, still facing the window. "It's everywhere." "I'm not going," he said. That made her turn. "You can't be serious." "I am." "Dylan, they're your investors, your partners, your company." He shook his head. "They're vultures, and if they think they can buy my silence with shame, they're wrong. You can't fight them all. Watch me." Her chest ached at the quiet defiance in his voice. "You'll lose everything. Then maybe it's time I did." Lily's throat tightened. There were things he didn't understand, things power had protected him from. When people like her lost everything, there was nothing left. But when men like him lost everything, the world called it reinvention. "Don't do this for me," she said. "I'm doing it because of you," he corrected softly. "Because you reminded me why I started all of this in the first place." She looked at him for a long moment, his reflection shimmering in the glass. Behind him, the world of privilege was unraveling. Behind her, the world of survival was waiting to swallow her again. "You can't save me," she whispered. He stepped closer, voice low. "I don't need to save you, Lily. I just need you to stay." The words landed between them like a confession, fragile and terrifying. For a second, she wanted to give in to believe that love could rewrite the rules of the world. But reality always had sharper teeth. "I can't," she said, and before he could reach for her, she walked past him, grabbed her coat, and left. The door closed softly behind her, but to Dylan it sounded like thunder. The boardroom that afternoon was colder than usual. The table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and every seat was filled. Dylan sat at the head shoulders, squared the picture of control, except for the faint tension in his jaw that betrayed how much effort it took to keep it. "Mr. Scott," one of the older board members began, her tone clipped. "This situation has compromised the integrity of the company. The media frenzy is out of control, investors are pulling out, and our clients are losing confidence. We need to mitigate the damage." And by mitigate, Dylan said, voice calm, "But cutting you mean bury." "We mean distance," another said. "From her, from the scandal, from anything that makes this company look unprofessional." The words hit like a blade, but Dylan didn't flinch. "Lily Collins did nothing wrong," he said. "Public perception doesn't care about right or wrong," the woman snapped. "It cares about optics." "So you'd rather fire her than face the truth that she was the reason our entire hospitality line turned around?" A heavy silence filled the room. "This isn't about her competence," the older man at the far end said finally. "It's about your judgment." Dylan leaned forward, his tone quiet but dangerous. "My judgment built this company from the ground up. And if any of you think I'll destroy an honest woman's life to protect your comfort, you've forgotten who I am." For a moment, no one spoke. Then one of them, the VP of Finance, slid a document across the table. "If you won't act, we will. The board is prepared to vote on a temporary suspension until the issue resolves." Dylan's eyes fell on the paper. A single signature line waited at the bottom, a neat place for him to sign away his power. He stood up slowly. "Then consider this my resignation." The room erupted in shock, but Dylan didn't stay to hear it. He walked out, leaving behind a board of millionaires who couldn't fathom a man choosing principle over profit. That evening, Lily returned to the Scott Grand one last time. The hotel was quiet, almost reverent, as if holding its breath for what it knew was coming. She made her way through the marble lobby, past the familiar scent of citrus polish and expensive perfume, to the restaurant they had once rebuilt together. The chef, Eduardo, looked up from the counter when he saw her. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. "I just needed to see it," she replied. "One last time." He sighed, wiping his hands on his apron. "He fought for you, you know, for this place, for everything." Lily's lips curved into a bittersweet smile. "That sounds like him. You're leaving, aren't you?" She nodded. "I have to." Eduardo hesitated. "He'll come after you." "I hope he doesn't," she said softly, "because if he does, I don't know if I'll have the strength to say no again." Outside, the city glowed beneath the weight of twilight. Lily stepped into the drizzle, the streetlights casting halos around her as she walked toward the train station. The same city that had once swallowed her whole now watched her go in silence. 2 days later, Dylan found her. Not in a boardroom, not in a hotel suite, but in a small cafe near the edge of Hyde Park, the kind of place that smelled like cinnamon and rain. She was sitting by the window, a notebook open in front of her, her curls tied loosely, her face pale but calm. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before she noticed him. When she did, she froze, then closed the notebook slowly. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice steady. "Neither should you," he replied. "You're supposed to be helping me rebuild a brand." "You quit," she reminded him. "I did," he said, "so I could start something better." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" He pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on the table between them. "I registered a new company this morning, Collins and Scott Culinary Group." Her eyes widened. "You used my name." "Our name," he corrected. "You said once that real is about the people who stay. So let's build something real." Lily stared at the paper, her heart caught between disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. "Dylan, this is insane." "Probably," he said, his voice softening. "But so was falling in love with you. And I did that anyway." The cafe fell silent around them. Outside, the rain began again, tapping softly against the glass. She wanted to say no, to tell him this wasn't how the world worked, that love didn't erase consequence. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw no empire, no ego, no arrogance. Just a man who had chosen her over everything else. "You'd give all that up," she whispered. "I already did," he said. "And somehow it feels like the first right decision I've made in years." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You're impossible." He smiled. "So are you." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The rain softened, the light shifted, and something inside her, something she'd buried under fear and reason, finally gave in. She reached across the table and took his hand. It was warm, solid, familiar. "If we do this," she said, "we do it my way. No press, no headlines. Just work, just truth." "Deal," he said, and for the first time in weeks, his smile reached his eyes. Months passed. The scandal faded, replaced by newer ones. The world moved on as it always did. But somewhere in the heart of Chicago, in a quiet building near the river, a new story was being written. The Collins and Scott Group became something rare, an empire built, not on image, but on integrity. Their restaurants weren't the most glamorous, but they were honest. The people who worked there were seen, valued, and heard. And every time a new dish was served, Lily could taste the history of what they'd built, equal parts struggle and faith. Sometimes when the sun set over the skyline, she'd find Dylan on the rooftop of their first restaurant, sleeves rolled up, looking at the city with that same distant focus he once wore in boardrooms. Only now, when he turned to her, his expression wasn't guarded. It was peaceful. "You ever think about what we lost?" she asked once. He shook his head. "Only what we found." Lily smiled, the kind that came from somewhere deep, where love stopped being an idea and became something lived, earned, fought for. She leaned against him, watching the river reflect the fading light. For a moment, everything was still: the city, the sky, the echoes of who they used to be. And then he whispered almost to himself, "You fell asleep in my bathroom once." She laughed softly. "And you still haven't let me live that down." He turned, his eyes warm, his hand finding hers. "No," he said, kissing her temple. Because that's the moment everything began. Above them, the night unfurled quietly over Chicago, soft, endless, forgiving. And for the first time, there were no storms left to survive. Just the simple, steady heartbeat of two lives, rebuilt not by perfection, but by love that refused to break.